Did you know that Hollywood has been eating our kids? They do Hunger Games down there, they do adoption, and they eat people. Because the vampires are getting hungry!
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We, or I, do this live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. You can support this project many ways. Go to echoplexmedia.com/support. Best way is our swag shop. It's at eplex.store. There are memberships there that work a lot like Patreon. And of course, you can buy swag there. So tonight's show is going to be pretty fucking weird. I don't know if people listening or watching are familiar with Jim Caviezel. He is kind of hooked up with Mel Gibson. He played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. And most recently, he was on that show, Person of Interest. The QAnon Anonymous podcast did a fucking crazy episode about him. And by crazy episode, I just mean it's crazy because it's about Jim Caviezel. So this is him on the Jordan Peterson show with Tim Ballard, who I can only assume is maybe his handler, something like that. This is the fight against worldwide child sex slave and the sex trade. But this dude is just fucking pilled. He is not like doing any work in any meaningful way to stop any kind of sexual abuse of anyone. And, you know, he's kind of all around a giant piece of shit, actually. So you'll find maybe a sanitized version of him here. But what I'm hoping is that you're not going to find a sanitized version of him here. And we're going to watch Jordan Peterson try to deal with somebody who is just absolutely pilled to the fucking gills. And without any further ado, this is the Jordan Peterson Show, episode 372. Oh, no. This is like Thursday. This is like the Wednesday show, the Thursday show, and the Friday show all in one show.
Hello, everyone watching and listening. Today I have the pleasure of speaking to two people. Someone you most likely know for his portrayal of Jesus of Nazareth in Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel, and also someone you should know, if you don't already, the man behind Operation Underground Railroad, Tim Ballard.
Oh no, that's not his handler. That guy's crazy too.
The Sound of Freedom.
Oh no, Operation Underground Railroad. They like go places and pretend to rescue kids, don't rescue any kids, and then just like take video of the place and pretend they rescued kids. Oh, this is going to be fucking crazy.
Tim Ballard, in the telling of his real life story detailing his fight against the increasingly worldwide and pervasive childhood sex trade. The film, The Sound of Freedom, releases on July 4th. So about a week and a half ago, I got
Oh, it's already out?
from Tony Robbins suggesting that I watch a new film called The Sound of Freedom.
Tony Robbins? Wait, Tony Robbins is pilled?
And I did that about 4 days ago with my wife, Tammy, and was quite struck by the movie. And I decided to follow up on it. It details out the efforts of one man, Tim Bellard, to investigate a child sexual slave ring and to rescue the children that were associated with that. But it also
Except
points
that's what
to
didn't
a
happen
broader
ever.
social problem, which is the spread of sexual and slave trafficking worldwide, abetted by the net, which is a great avenue for psychopathic criminals to pursue
To bilk their followers out of a bunch of money and start an internet cult?
their darkest desires with very little risk of being caught, especially on the multinational basis. So I've decided to reach out to Tim Bellard, who is the man who the movie is about, and to Jim Caviezel, who's the actor that plays him, to talk about what all this signifies. And so, Tim, let's start with you. I mean, the movie makes the case that there is a widely expanding network of slavery, essentially making itself manifest worldwide, concentrating in no small part on very young children who are being sold repeatedly to pedophilic psychopaths to have at their will, and of course can be sold repeatedly for that purpose. And the movie makes
But not if you murder them and drink their adrenochrome.
that this is now an operation that's rivaling the drug trade in magnitude. So, it sounds like yet another right-wing conspiracy. So please, why don't you walk us through what you know? And
No. This isn't yet another right-wing conspiracy, Jordan. This is fucking QAnon.
understand, and everybody watching and listening, exactly what you think is going on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jordan. We're so grateful you take your time to do this with us. So I spent 12 years as a special agent, undercover operator with the Department of Homeland Security. Most of my time, 90% of that time, was spent investigating these cases, child crimes, child trafficking.
Well, why do you no longer do that in official capacity?
In fact, those numbers are correct. That are being these are Department of Labor, UN. These are sources that the best we have that say that there's close to 6 million children or more who are forced into sex slavery, labor slavery, or organ harvesting. And I can attest.
Whoa, yeah, this is going to be pilled.
That I have been involved in cases involving all three of those forms of slavery multiple times, and is a real thing. It's not even far from home.
So like the thing that he's describing is a real thing, but the way he's going to describe it is going to be completely detached from reality.
The United States is the number one consumer year after year of child rape material. And oftentimes we're close to number one in production. And it's a serious matter. The case, the story in Sound of Freedom kicks off with the rescue of a little boy at the port of entry at the southern border. That's a real story, a real boy that I was on that port of entry. I was 10 years on the southern border. So when you have 85,000 unaccompanied minors showing up in the last 2 years, being let into the country without the sponsor being vetted, DNA checked, background checked.
Why do you have to check their DNA?
I call it the economy of pedophilia. The United States, we're the demand. 85,000 children, thousands of them are under 5 years old, are let into the country. So we have a serious problem, and it's not being addressed as it should be. Hopefully, this film can do that.
What has been your experience with regard to so-called mainstream media or legacy media coverage? How much attention has been paid to this, and if not much, why? And if reasonably, who and how?
Well, I think not very much has been, attention has been given by mainstream media. Oftentimes it's more innocent than cynical, perhaps, where it's just, this is too dark. I don't want to expose our audience to this.
Or it's because like the people who are doing the real work on this don't have any money. The organizations who do actual work to help the victim survivors of this or to prevent it, they don't have no fucking money. They don't got a fucking publicist. So they don't really get on the news. It's kind of fucked up, actually, because there's people that do really hard and traumatizing work trying to do, like, actually help people. You ain't never going to know their names, but you're going to know this guy's name because he, for whatever reason, no longer does this in an official capacity with law enforcement.
Thing. We film our operations. I mean, I'm going to post today another operation in West Africa of a baby factory. I mean, these are real cases where they've kidnapped women, as young as 13-year-olds and children, and they impregnate them, they rape them, and they make babies, and they take these babies and sell them for their organs, sell them for sex, sell them for satanic ritual.
Oh no!
Abuse. Like they sell them for their organs, sell them for sex, sell them for satanic ritual abuse. Like
yo, I told you this episode of this show is going to be our Wednesday live stream, our Thursday live stream, and our Friday live stream, all in one podcast.
It does sound crazy. That's why I film it. Our operations, we film our operations.
Do you have film of the
so
satanic ritual abuse?
This is very real. It's really happening. And I think if there's 2 million children forced into commercial sex, which is the most kind of credible statistic that we can find, a lot of people are involved. So there is a more cynical answer to your question, which may be there's people that don't want this exposed because they're involved in it.
So I'm going
to QAnon.
harass you a bit here. From the Wikipedia page, there is some, not that I'm a particular fan of Wikipedia pages.
Oh yeah, Jordan Peterson's is wild.
On the circumstances, but there are some criticisms of what you're doing, and I thought we might as well address them right off the bat, because people who are watching are going to be, look, man, if I was coming across this for the first time, and in some ways I am, I've got two choices in front of me, don't I? I can either presume that you've discovered something that's ongoing and of tremendous significance, that's terribly dark, or I can assume that the difficult work that you had done for a decade, genuinely addressing these problems, has made you hypersensitive to a threat and willing to magnify it. And
oh, no. There's a third option. He got fired from doing this kind of work or was relieved from his position because he started spouting off about satanic ritual abuse.
And it would be easier just to ignore you as a consequence. Now, that would be the preferable outcome to such an investigation, wouldn't it? So you can, as you said, you can understand why people might want to avert their eyes from such a thing. So I'm going to walk through these criticisms, and maybe you could, you can respond to them, and we can get that out of the way before we go deeper into the film and your operations. So your group, and this is Operation Underground Railroad, and tell me if I get anything wrong here. It says it devours conspiracy theories, though founder Tom Ballard was criticized for refusing to condemn the QAnon conspiracy theory. I have no idea what the hell that means. Do you know what that's
get the fuck out of here. I have what the fuck is the QAnon conspiracy? Shut the fuck up. You're having these people on because you want to try to court that audience, or you want to reinforce to the part of your audience that believes that you're one of them, that you're their guy.
Referring to?
Yeah, absolutely. We that's a lie on Wikipedia. We have absolutely in our FAQs for years have condemned the majority of what we see with conspiracy theories. So they like to attribute me to the QAnon movement. There may be some truths in there, but there's so many falsehoods on top of it.
As soon as you said the organ harvesting and satanic ritual abuse, we're not trying to paint you with any kind of brush. You showed up the color that you showed up.
So our FAQs refute that immediately.
Oh, we have a fucking thing on our website that says that the criticism against us is not true. Well, fucking case closed, motherfucker.
It discredits the movement. In fact, I would go so far as to consider that maybe certain people who don't want this known are responsible for some of the conspiracy theories in order to discredit the movement. And they go too far. They go too far in their assessment of things. But yeah, we absolutely have disavowed what's generally coming out of QAnon.
Yeah, well, it says, it's very vague on Wikipedia. It says to condemn the QAnon conspiracy theory. Well, I know perfectly well that there are more than one conspiracy theories, let's say, on QAnon. So I'm not
But I thought you said you didn't even know what that was a minute ago.
exactly sure what it's referring to. What is there a particular conspiracy theory that you were criticized for refusing to condemn? Do you have any more specific details about that?
I mean, I'm not sure what exactly they're talking about. They might be referring to the fact that there's something called adrenochrome, where they're taking children's blood and devouring it and so forth. And I've explained my experience with that, and I just did in West Africa.
What is your experience with that?
Other places, we've seen this in several parts of the continent of Africa, and it's very real. It's very real. This witch doctory. They take.
Oh no, hell of racist too. There's witch doctory. Oh no, what the fuck? I thought this guy was gonna be like saying the other thing. He's just saying no. This part of it, the part that I've been criticized for. No, I just think that's true.
These children, they take their organs, they take their blood, they drink it, they take the genitalia of children and hang it over the rooftop of their businesses, thinking that the dark gods will bless them. These are real things. And so I might say something like that, and then they connect it to something that a QAnon person says about.
You mean the exact same thing that you're saying right now? Just literally the exact fucking thing that they might connect it to that? Huh, how'd that come to be?
A celebrity who must be doing this too, but there's no evidence to back that, and they make a false connection there, and so that's the only example.
So it's not the celebrities; it's the people in Africa.
Well, the next thing it says is that the Operation Underground Railway falsely claimed that it had entered a partnership with American Airlines. That was in 2022. So what do you have to say about that?
Oh, that's a great one. So a PR firm who represented us made a deal with American Airlines. It came to us and said, shoot the video. They're going to put this video on they're going to put this video on their airlines. They shot the video of me. I just get a call from our PR company to put me in a studio. I give a video that I think I'm talking to the passengers for 1 month on American Airlines.
Yeah, the PR company did some good PR for you. And American Airlines is like, oh, is this against child trafficking? Yeah, we could put a PSA against child trafficking. And then his fucking video looked like an Ann Vandersteel video or like a fucking Liz Crokin video. And they were like, oh, we're actually, what we're going to do is not run this on our airplanes for our passengers.
Apparently the deal fell through. The PR company didn't tell us that. And our marketing team put out, hey, we're going to be on American Airlines. The PR company apologized. We fired them. They said, we can't believe we didn't get the message to you. And that was it. And of course, there's people that want so badly for us to be wrong or us to not do what we say we do. So they exploited that. I think that was a Vice magazine, very incredibly dishonest journal.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing. This is fucking disgusting. I mean, Jordan Peterson is a giant piece of shit, but I didn't think he was going to. Well, I mean, if somebody would have asked me at the beginning of the year, they'd be like, hey, a little over halfway through the year, Jordan Peterson's just going to have a complete QAnon fucking interview. I'd be like, yeah, probably.
We call them journalists. The Vice magazine, they've done a series of hit pieces on us. And I encourage people to read it. Read Vice, because everything they say is so ridiculous and so dishonest.
Right. Yes. Well, and I do believe, if I remember correctly, that Vice has also declared bankruptcy in the last few weeks, and I can't imagine an organization more richly deserving. There was a 2021 follow-up article from Vice, but I don't think we're going to. I'll just read part of it because it's so ridiculous. Conflating consensual sex work with sex trafficking. Yeah, well, that's exactly the kind of Weasley what would you call it, criticism that I'd expect from people who are trying to justify the sorts of behaviors that you are attempting to expose.
But what if they're right? What if, and that's something I hadn't really heard. But what if he does a lot of that? What if, like, most of the time when he says, oh, these are, people who are being trafficked or whatever, you come to find out that they're consensually engaged in sex work. Sex work is illegal in most places, but that doesn't mean they're being trafficked. And like, because sex work is illegal, there's a lot of bad shit that goes on around it, even with people consenting to sex work, but that's not human trafficking.
Then there's a 2021 article in Slate criticizing a 2014 raid conducted by Operation Underground Railway in the Dominican Republic, saying that it was likely to have traumatized the trafficked children. Anne Gallagher, an authority on human trafficking, wrote in 2015 that OUR had an alarming lack of understanding about how sophisticated criminal trafficking networks must be approached and dismantled, and called the work of OUR arrogant, unethical, and illegal. So, Anne, have a way at that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm grateful for this opportunity. So someone like Anne Gallagher, who lives 3,000 miles away from any operation we've ever done, is not qualified to talk about what our operations. She can't give any details. She can't give any
So you can't talk. Well, what the fuck? Why the fuck is Jordan Peterson then talking about trans people who live more than 3,000 miles away from him?
The Slate article is a fun one to address. I've addressed it several times. We early on, we brought a blogger down to watch our operations. We invite people down. Like Tony Robbins has been down.
Tony Robbins? Like why? Oh my God.
Attorney General of Utah has come in our operations. If we're hiding something, that's the last thing.
The only thing missing from this is Oprah.
So we bring this journalist, this blogger. I won't call her a journalist. And we thought she was a friend, and she came and watched a legitimate operation happen in Dominican Republic. There were 7 traffickers who showed up, 7 traffickers arrested. There were 20 plus people rescued. 9 of them were children. You can't always control who shows up to the sting party. The traffickers bring who they will, but 9 children showed up. They were all liberated from the control of their captors. This blogger then wrote 2 glowing stories about it, that she witnessed this. She had very minimal exposure to the operation itself. She witnessed it. Some 7 years later, she decides to use it, in my opinion, to somehow increase her social media following as our foundation grew. And she writes a story that it's in Slate. Now, here's the key thing. 9 children rescued, and 9 children had 3 years of aftercare services in this operation provided by International Justice Mission, one of the top authorities in
that International Justice Mission means religious group. That word mission there.
Aftercare and fighting human trafficking. 7 traffickers were not only arrested, but all 7 were convicted. So she chose the wrong case to criticize. Now, tellingly,
I wonder what the criticism was. I wonder if this guy's just, in this case, was like doing a version of ambulance chasing. Like somehow he found out there was going to be some kind of raid or sting operation and just showed up there to take credit for it.
If anyone's going to write a story about that operation, good, bad, or otherwise, and they leave out the part that says 7 traffickers were arrested and 7 traffickers were convicted, and 9 children were liberated and had 3 years of aftercare to heal them. If you leave that part out, either you are extremely incompetent as a researcher and writer, or you're a liar. Either way, the story has 0 credibility on that fact alone. Because she doesn't even report on those two essential elements.
All right. Well, we've hypothetically dispensed with Vice, which of course is yeah, well, it's pretty funny that that's what they named their organization as far as I'm concerned. And we'll leave this.
Why? Vice that's a cool name for your organization. It's loosely based on an old magazine.
Aside, Jim, let me ask you.
Oh, here we go.
Questions, if you don't mind. Do you want to first of all tell people about your involvement with Angel Studios, a little bit about your career and why this particular movie, Sound of Freedom? It's opening in early July. Is it July? When does it come out?
It comes out July 4th week. So next week it's out in theaters nationwide.
So let me turn to Jim. Jim, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, do you want to detail out your association with Angel Studios? Tell everybody first who Angel Studios are, what they've done. And I've watched a lot of The Chosen, by the way, which I thought was extremely high quality. Do you tell us about the studio? Tell us about your involvement with them, about your career, and then about your attraction to this particular movie.
Well, let's start with the movie first. I have 3 adopted children from China. I became aware of the dangers.
Wait, how did you? I'm just not even going to ask the obvious fucking question. There's plenty of kids here in the U.S. that need to be adopted. I'm not going to, I mean, the obvious question just hangs in the air.
Go on with children around the world and through that process. Then I became aware of Tim Ballard, and coincidentally, then my friend Eduardo Verostegui brought me this script because many of the actors that they had offered it to didn't want to get involved in this particular project.
No shit.
I read the script. I loved the movie Taken, and I thought this is like Taken, but with a much bigger heart. Then Tim Ballard.
Also, the movie Taken doesn't claim to be a fucking true story.
Came to the meeting. He had seen 2 films that I did. One was called The Count of Monte Cristo, and then the other one was The Passion of the Christ, and he felt that I'd be the right guy to play him. Angel Studios, I had no connection to them until a few months ago when they wanted to do this movie, and their idea was to sell 2 million tickets for these 2 million trafficked children.
So why is it?
But then who gets the money from that 2 million tickets for the 2 million trafficked children? Did you give it to? Oh, they keep it.
A number of actors. Why, in your estimation, did a number of actors turn down the opportunity to play the role? What and why did you decide to forego that risk and to climb aboard?
I foregoed the risk because when you have 3 children that you loved and you'd give your life for, it kind of connects into Tim Ballard, and Tim did this for this little girl and the children that he saves. It's something is a greater purpose that even your career, like I went through this with Mel Gibson when we did The Passion, that my career was the last thing I thought of. What I thought about.
Or it could be that the last time you had a gig on Person of Interest, you did things like when an Asian executive came up to you and introduced himself, you were like, awesome, which isn't even a thing, but it's, pretty racist. Or during a scene, you took the guy that played Lester Freeman from The Wire and put him in a headlock and dragged him across the room, even though it wasn't in the script. Or during a scene where you were driving a car, you decided to just in the streets of LA run fucking traffic lights and drive recklessly, like for real, like not as a stunt. Any number of reasons why you took this gig that nobody else took.
Was the God I love. And I put this, and how I look at it is that this God that I love, he loves me and he deserved to be loved back. And so I would be nothing without him. He gave me my purpose in this life. So the Tim Ballard, I was very fortunate that he had seen those films. And when I looked at, and I think Tim made this comparison, Schindler's List was a very powerful weapon, but it came 50 years too late. This film is now. This is exposing it now during that time. And I believe that is probably why it's easier to get an actor to do a movie 50 years later. There's no controversy. It's over. But then...
Yeah, you know what I remember about the movie Schindler's List? Completely non-controversial.
Imagine if Rwanda, if that story had been made, that movie had been made during that time, or that they could see it. You have to look at these situations and understand that good people sit back and do nothing and allow this evil to occur. There's got to be people that stand up in the time that it occurs. And that's what drew me to the whole story in the first place.
And how do you feel about the movie? Now you've seen the movie in its entirety. It's about to be released. It's a fully fledged, high quality production. I was particularly impressed by the cinematography. It's also extraordinarily well edited. The acting, I don't want to flatter you, but the acting
Leaves something to be desired.
extremely high quality. It's a very realistic movie. How do you feel about your involvement
Dude,
now?
there's stories of this, from this dude on again on Person of Interest, where he just refused to memorize his lines, and so he had his lines on a piece of paper in his hand, and you would see him looking down during the show, and you thought it was like him being thoughtful or listening to people or whatever. No, he was like looking to see what his next line was.
Now that everything is done, and how do you feel about what would you say, the production capacity of Angel Studios, which is a relatively, it's a relative newcomer on the mass entertainment block?
When I was sitting next to Tim Ballard and he leaned over and he started to weep heavily, I knew I did my job.
So do you want to run us briefly through, I don't want to give away the entire plot because that would obviously be pointless, but do you want to just run us briefly through?
Oh, you could give away the entire plot of this movie, and I'm definitely going to get high as a kite and watch this movie. I'm going to acquire it. I'll find a way to acquire it without paying for it. And man, it's a shame. It's a shame that it's not worth our first copyright strike to watch this thing on stream, right?
The plot of the movie, and then I'll turn to Tim and fill in some of the background details of his life. And
so I play Tim Ballard. He's Homeland Security. He sets up these sting operations to take down these very, very bad men to save trafficked children. And in one particular case, one of the traffickers that he takes down, Ernst Lipachinski, he rescues this boy, and the little boy turns to him and says, "Will you save my sister?" And Tim goes back, gets
the X-Files. He's like, "Where's my sister?"
Direction from above and from his wife, and goes back and he sells everything to find this little girl.
so what I liked about the script, so I've noticed that one of the most effective ways of communicating complex ideas effectively is to particularize the problem. And so what happens in this movie is that the broad problem of slavery and human trafficking, and the somewhat narrower problem of sexual trafficking of children is zeroed.
Come on. I want to hear more about the satanic ritual abuse. Jordan Peterson's just going to pretend the first guy never said shit about satanic ritual abuse.
Is what focused on a particular case. And so that gives the movie a very powerful narrative underpinning, right? Because when a problem is particularized and you can see how it affects actual specific people's lives, it becomes much more realistic and much more palpable. And I thought the movie did a good job of that. Tim, do you want to walk everybody listening through? Let's go back into the details of your life. Now, you worked for this, we worked for the Special Forces per se. And who were you working for before you decided to forego your career and to pursue the case that we're describing?
The real question here is, why are you no longer doing this in an official capacity? But Jordan's not going to ask that. I don't know the answer, but if I had to wager a guess, it was because he started telling everybody about fucking satanic ritual abuse and shit at work. And they were like, listen, we can kind of pretend that this isn't going on and you can move on, or, maybe we'll have to fire you.
So I worked for 12 years as a special agent and undercover operator for the Department of Homeland Security, the investigative division called Homeland Security Investigations. 10 of those years were spent on the border, tracking child traffickers, people who would exploit children with child exploitation material. So I really learned a lot. In 2006, the laws changed in the United States. And for the first time, U.S. agents were permitted and encouraged to go overseas and find children who Americans were abusing. And we could now hold those Americans accountable as if they had committed that crime on U.S. soil. That's what really changed my life, because I speak Spanish fluently, and they sent me overseas, south of the border. That's when my eyes opened up and I started seeing the children that I used to only see mostly on the pornography, on the child exploitation material cases. But it was tormenting.
You know what? I want to see this guy's hard drive.
The U.S. government.
There's only one organization in the United States that's allowed to catalog this stuff, and I forget the name of it. And then they make like a hash of the CSM so that so that it can be found without people having to see it.
wittingly was, because if I couldn't find that connection back to the United States, the American kid or the American pedophile, I had to come home. But the problem is I've already been exposed to the children. I've already been exposed to the problem, and oftentimes have made myself the bait. And in 2012, I
do you
had
make
enough on this case. I went further than otherwise I probably should have. The movie didn't have time to tell you that there was another case in Haiti at the same time that I was working, thinking there was a U.S. nexus. And I was told in both instances to come home and you couldn't work these cases. And that's when I had a very consequential conversation with my wife. And I said, if I stay here, if I do this operation with or without my badge, it doesn't matter at this point. I can do the work. We will save kids. But I have to lose my job, and we have 6 children. And this is a moral dilemma like I've never faced in my life. And I was hoping my wife would have responded with, "Get your ass home. You can't abandon us. You know, first of all, you're going to die without the top cover of the U.S. government if you continue this. And who's going to pay the bills and feed the kids?" She didn't say that. She said to me, "You have to quit your job." And it was that easy for her. It became spiritual for her even. She felt a calling and a responsibility that she might have to reckon with one day.
Well, those 6 kids never had a chance.
And I knew that she felt that way when she told me this in the crucial moment of decision, about 2 days before I ended up turning my badge and gun over and went private. She said to me, "I will not let you jeopardize my salvation by not doing this." And when she said those words, and I knew she meant those words, that changed everything for me.
So she probably believed his stories about SRM, SRA, satanic ritual abuse.
And we jumped.
She believed the stories about SRA, and the people he was working for were like, no. We're in the business of taking people's rights away, and to some extent, chasing down people who are actually hurting children.
To really just an irrational act of service, I might call it, because it wasn't rational in many ways. But ultimately, it ended in the operation you see depicted in the film, which shows 54 children, some adult women, young adult women were in that group as well, rescued on that island. But what the movie doesn't.
So what he's saying is what he's saying is we found a bunch of sex workers, and some of them were under 18. Now that's bad. But he mentioned that some of them were young adults. Well, I don't know if they were even being trafficked. And like if they were overseas, I don't know what the laws are over there. Some places got some fucked up laws. But we just can't go around imposing our laws on other countries.
Have the time to report is that in actuality it was 120.
Oh.
There was 2 other locations being taken down at the same time. And there's a documentary that's going to follow in the wake of Sound of Freedom called Triple Take. Angel Studios will put it out, documenting the entire story. And so in the end, it was successful, and we were able to build upon that success. And I founded Operation Underground Railroad. I run another foundation that was founded by Glenn Beck called the Nazarene Fund. And we're doing these kind of operations all over the world.
Oh, today. You're grifting. You're grifting off of Glenn Beck.
So let's go back in time to before you worked as a security agent for the homeless or an agent for the Homeland Security Investigations Unit. How were you trained to do that? Like, what was your background before you became employed as an agent? And what was it about you that made you capable of engaging in this sort of operation?
So I got a graduate degree in international politics, and I always wanted to be in federal law enforcement. My first job was CIA. I was there during 9/11, working in the operations center.
Oh, I'm real skeptical of anybody that says they are or they were in the CIA.
Wake of 9/11.
Except Michael Weston and Burn Notice, obviously.
I found out that I studied terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. That was actually the degree I got at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. And so I was an easy recruit into the CIA because, 9/11 had just happened. When I found out that one of the terrorists, Mohammed Atta, had staged his attack from Mexicali, Mexico, and crossed the border, and I speak Spanish, I wanted to go fight terrorism on the southern border. So I ended up jumping ship from CIA and I joined the newly created Homeland Security Department and became a special agent for
So
6
someone in
months.
chat said that there's no real evidence that the Department of Homeland Security has such a division. That doesn't mean it's not there, right? They're, intelligence gathering organizations often have divisions that you don't know about. There's a joke that the NSA stands for no such agency, but I don't believe this guy. I don't believe a word of what this guy is saying.
Months I was tracking those kind of movements, not human trafficking or child exploitation, but money, guns, terrorism. 6 months into that endeavor, I was called into the office of a supervisor, and they asked me if I would please forego everything that I wanted to do with my career and help them start a child crimes unit. I do not know why they asked me. One thing he did say to me was, "You're a young agent, but you're a person of faith." And we know
Wait,
that
what?
about
No,
you.
that's not what they. No, listen. I don't like the fucking Homeland Security or whatever, right? But they don't. I don't think that if they're going to run around fucking taking everybody's rights, I don't think that whether or not you're religious really occurs to them, right? Like, I don't think that this is. They're like, oh, we have to find a deeply religious person to do whatever nefarious shit that we're doing.
It's a requirement, or your soul will be crushed.
The Bible is a root of wisdom, inspiration, teaching. God provides lit by symbol experience.
Nope, no commercial.
I would like you, if you would, to tell us, to the degree that you can, what you were typically dealing with when you started working for the Child Sex Crimes Unit. Let us know what you saw. Let us know what that did to you, because that sort of thing, that changes people's conceptions of humanity per se. Let's say the nature of the cosmos and what it means to be human, right? I mean, when you
change what you think about the nature of the cosmos,
people who are capable of that level of darkness, you start to understand something about the nature of the human soul that you can't understand any other way. And that can be, that's the sort of thing that gives people post-traumatic stress disorder when they're soldiers. So, and now you said also your supervisors had an inkling that you might be protected against that, at least to some degree, because of your faith. So let's walk through what you learned.
None of that happened, right? That's highly unprofessional. Also, just like, yeah, it's highly unprofessional, but also like it's like a bad metric by which to hire someone for anything, except like maybe priest.
What did you see when you were working as part of this child sex crimes unit?
What I saw was so shocking, Jordan. I thought child sex crimes would be 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. My brain couldn't comprehend something.
Again, never. The question just hangs in the air.
More evil than abusing that age. The very first case I worked in 2002, I believe, I was given a bunch of VHS videos, some hard drives to look at that had been seized in a warrant. The very first.
Wait. No, that's someone else's job. No. You're. That would be the job of like an analyst or of like digital forensics. This guy just did all. I was a jack of all trades. This stuff is so highly compartmentalized that this guy wasn't doing all these different things. This is bullshit. You wouldn't be given them if it was important to your job. You'd be taken into a room and shown this material. They wouldn't just be like, "Here, Tim, here's a pile of tapes. Go take a look at these tapes."
3 little boys that were probably 7, 5, and 3, and they looked like my children. They had, they had blonde hair, blue eyes, and they were being just raped. These 3 little boys by this pedophile.
But if your job is to track this person down, all you have to know is that this happened. You don't have to see the material. In fact, I think it would be bad to show someone trying to track this down, this kind of material. You would be bad at your job now because you would be angry.
To my knees, I dry heaved thinking I was going to throw up into the wastebasket. I jumped into my car. I drove to my children's school, my 3 oldest kids. I checked them out. I still remember in my mind, I can still see dentist appointment I wrote. And I grabbed them. I took them home and just sobbed on the floor. My wife came in and I wouldn't let the kids go. I was just holding them and shaking. That was my very first experience. You talk about PTSD. I absolutely deal with PTSD to this day. I took too long to actually deal with it. That's another story. And I thought, I can't do this. I can't do this. I started getting help immediately because I didn't want to quit. That's what this is. That's what this is. And those kind of videos have increased over the last couple of years by 5,000%.
Yeah, well, in Canada, we just had a report from an organization called the Western Standard that 1 million child sexual exploitation photos and videos have been identified in an Alberta child porn investigation. 1 million photos, 8 arrests made. Okay, so that's some indication of the widespread nature of the problem. Now, you said that when you first encountered...
I know this is fucked up, but that's not that many photos, and they probably weren't new. This is fucked up. This is the most fucked up thing we've ever covered on the Intellectual Dollar Tree, and we've seen some shit.
It made you physically ill and also terrified for the safety of your children, but then also it necessitated you seeking help, I suppose, or aid. I mean, I've worked with people who've had post-traumatic stress disorder. Generally, what happens is that tragedy is not enough to give someone post-traumatic stress disorder, even if it's rather severe. It has to be a combination of tragedy and malevolence. And the real trauma comes as a consequence of contact with evil, with malevolence. And what people generally have to do in order to recover from that is to develop a rather profound philosophy of evil. And, a religious faith in its most fundamental essence is a philosophy of good and evil. It does detail out the heart of darkness among human beings, point out to people, and this is particularly, although not uniquely true of the Christian tradition, but particularly true, that capacity for evil lurks in the heart of everyone, and that our fundamental moral obligation as we sojourn here on earth is to overcome that proclivity within and also to stand up against it in the external world. And so you said you received some aid after you had been exposed to this first set of videos. What is it about the way you looked at the world that had to change in order for you to adapt to what you were encountering?
Well, I had to come to grips with an idea that I had never been confronted with before, that there are people, and not a few, but millions of people, only millions of pedophiles could justify a demand of millions of child exploitation material.
But this is like a fucking like a cooked version of how child abuse happens. Child abuse, the vast majority is unfortunately someone the family knows or trusts, or someone in the family. That's why it's sick, actually. That's why it's so troubling. Not just the abuse itself, but the the fact that it's someone known to and trusted by the family in just the overwhelming majority of cases.
And so forth. The first person you see arrested in the movie is a real person named Ernst Lupolszczynski in Sound of Freedom. He had over 2 million pieces of child rape material in his house. So to be confronted with the reality that there are people on this planet, and like I said, not a few, but millions, who want to indulge in watching 5-year-old children be raped and sexually assaulted in ways that, and I'm sorry to be so raw, but I feel comfortable with you, Dr. Peterson, but to watch children's bodies actually break in the act of sexual assault, acts that your mind couldn't conjure up if you tried to conjure it up, and that it's real.
And he's like, believe me, I've tried.
It's so shocking to the system. it changes your life forever. I tell people, if I feel like I've had a million holes burned into my brain because I've watched thousands of hours of that kind of material. Not only watch it, and I love the scene that Jim depicts where that's very real. I can't watch the movie, but the movie's very good. The movie doesn't show any of this, by the way. It doesn't show anything like this. I don't want people to run away and be scared.
Well, no shit. Otherwise, none of you would be here right now if your movie had these kinds of depictions, even fictionalized.
See the scene where the camera flashes a close up into Jim's eyes, and that was me for 10 years. Not only watching, but writing it in details for the court to see, for the prosecutors to see, and raising children at the same time that are the very same age. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, I have 9 children. At the time I left the government at 6. And so I can always identify the age of a child with one of my own children. And what my mind was almost automatically doing is I would superimpose my own children's face.
Okay, you're a sick fuck. If this is true, this guy is a sick fuck. I'm fucking shocked. He's like, oh, I'm so glad this story is bullshit, right? I mean, I'm very glad this story is bullshit because this is fucking sick. He's like, oh, as part of my job, I was unfortunately exposed to a CSAM. And I just, superimposed my kids' faces onto the victims. Oh, you're a sick fuck.
And persons onto these children, and that led to the PTSD. I'll be honest, and almost a paranoia about what would happen to my children and watching my children. And I've come a long ways, and I'm able to deal with it. But I was determined never to quit. And so I just sought more help, and I won't quit. So,
okay, so Tim, I'm going to walk you through what I know about how people turn into the sort of pedophile that you and everyone else, I suppose, or virtually everyone else, finds so mysterious.
Mysterious?
So, I'm going to refer first to the story of Cain and
choice
Abel
of words,
because
but
it
whatever.
actually puts its finger on the process in a stunning manner. So what happens in that story is that 2 different pathways to adaptation are detailed out, and they become the cardinal pathways of adaptation that characterize the whole human race, immersed as it is from that point onward in history instead of in the Garden of Eden. And one is the pathway of Cain, and the other is the pathway of Abel. Now, Abel makes high-quality sacrifices. He's all in, right? He puts himself on the line, and he does the real thing. And as a consequence, he finds favor with God, and his sacrifices are rewarded. He does well, and everyone loves him, and he thrives. And Cain, his sacrifices are not of the same quality. He tries to cut the corners and to pull the wool over his eyes and God's eyes and everyone
Jordan Peterson has told this story like 3 or 4 times this year.
Else's eyes. And as a consequence, his sacrifices are rejected. And instead of cluing the hell in and waking up and taking responsibility for his failure, he decides that he's going to call out God for creating a cosmos that's cosmically unfair and unjust. And the evidence for that is Cain's failure and Abel's success. And so he has a little chat with God, and he basically calls him out and says, I'm breaking myself in half here and nothing's going my way. And Abel gets everything he wants. And, how dare you make a cosmos so radically unjust and improper? And why don't you just straighten yourself out? And God says, if you did well, you would be rewarded for it, and you should look to yourself. And then he says something even worse. And this is very subtle because it's complicated to understand it unless you look at multiple translations or potentially the original Hebrew, which I can't read, but I read the multiple translations. God says to Cain, the spirit of sin crouches at your doorstep like a sexually aroused predatory animal, and you have invited it in.
What the fuck?
To have its way with you. And so now, if you study the development of the fantasies of very, very dark people, you see that they brood and fantasize in isolation for years. And the fantasies get darker and darker and darker. So they're bitter and resentful to begin with. And then they start fantasizing about, well, what they would want. That can take a sexual end, or it can take a very violent end, or it can take both. And what they're really after is the ultimate in revenge. And on the sexual front, they find a kick in extending the, what would you call it, unacceptability of the fantasy one stage at a time. The famous and extremely attractive sexual serial killer, what was his name? There's a famous photograph of him like this, very attractive man. Do you remember his name?
Ted Bundy.
Anybody? Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy detailed out exactly how his fantasies progressed as he became more and more involved with pornography. And what happens in some sense is that these people who are nursing these terrible fantasies want to stay on the edge of novelty. And so their fantasies get darker and darker and darker as they progress down that road. And so after 1,000 such micro progressions, they end up in exactly the sort of pit that you're describing. And some of that is pure sexual kick because of the novelty. And
because of this is the yo, the way he's talking about this is fucking, this is, I feel I'm starting to feel kind of sick to my fucking stomach.
Vengeful twist. You could think about it this way. You know, I think it says in the Gospels that, you know, it would be better that a millstone was hung around your neck and that you were cast into the abyss than to do harm to any of God's children, let's say. And that's actually where the perverse delight comes, because the most egregious possible sin, let's say, is the violent sexual abuse of the most innocent possible person. And the perverse novelty kick is highest at exactly that point. And then that just goes from bad to worse. And there's 1,000 or even 10,000 micro decisions that go along with that. There's also a great book called Ordinary Men. This is well worth reading, although it's a bloody catastrophe to read, I'll tell you. It details out how a group of German policemen who were moved to Poland during World War II were transformed from ordinary ordinary working class men, old enough to not have been raised under the Nazi regime, by the way, and so not propagandized into a kind of mindless obedience, how they went from being perfectly ordinary policemen to the sort of people who could take naked pregnant women out into the middle of a field and shoot them in the back of the head. And it
like,
isn't
what
like
the
they had
shit?
an easy time with that. Some of them reported the same sort of thing that you reported when you first watched that video. What they were being called upon to do stage by stage made them physically ill. And they had a commander who actually had told them that they could leave the service if they didn't want to continue with their duties. But they felt duty bound not to leave their comrades having to mop up the terrible situation. But it does a lovely job of detailing out how your movement from normality to absolute perversity is a consequence of 10,000 micro violations of your own conscience. Not all of them micro, obviously. So you need to know about the vengefulness. You need to know about the kick of sadism. That's that novelty kick that produces a dopaminergic kick that heightens sexual satisfaction. And so there's an element of sadistic misery that can add novelty to sex.
Okay, I can't fucking take it anymore. People out there, you're free to watch the rest of this. We're at about 44 minutes into this. I can't watch another fucking second of this. No. You know, we've seen a lot of shit here, but I'm legitimately starting to feel queasy listening to the way Jordan Peterson is describing this. So podcast listeners, we're going to go ahead and make this week's show a freebie. You can go ahead and get the whole show. You can get it at patreon.com/echoplex. And, but yeah, I don't know if anybody's still fucking listening, like on the podcast. I'm going to watch the podcast metrics, and the first 5 or 10 minutes are going to be pretty good. And then it's going to just fall off the fucking cliff. I don't know why is this still on YouTube? I mean, I know why this is still on YouTube. They're they love people like Jordy Pete and his content. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm usually better at closing out the show. This has been the Intellectual Dollar Tree. This song is Boomers by Periscope. I'm definitely going to need a fucking drink after this. I'm going to change the colors of the lights. Maybe go vomit. And we'll be back with a red light.